Okay, welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Thursday, June 3rd. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. And here are the stories for the day. Cherokee Mangus sends us this article in with a photo by David Carrasco, commander of the POWMIA KIA Honor Guard of Arizona. The Military Order of the Purple Heart, a Department of Veterans Affairs, along with U.S. Senator John McCain, honored a forgotten 85-year-old Navajo Native American World War II veteran this Memorial Day weekend in Prescott, Arizona. Ward Farley received 7 medals, including the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart, which Farley earned but never received as an infantry rifleman in various European campaigns during World War II. He was with Company C, 413th Infantry Regiment, 104th Infantry Division, known as the Timberwolf Division. Ward Farley returned to his life as a rancher on the Navajo Reservation in southeast Utah and waited 65 years to receive his recognition. Farley, at the tender age of 17, enlisted in the U.S. Army when he could speak only Navajo on December 18, 1942. Fighting with the famed Timberwolf Division, Farley participated in the division's hard-fought assault on Cologne, Germany. In one of the numerous nighttime attacks which earned the division worldwide recognition, the 104th spanned the Aurora River on February 23, 1945. Farley was seriously wounded in the attack, and he laid untreated for 2 days before he was found and evacuated to England for treatment. On December 4, 1945, Ward Farley received medical retirement papers that reflected the award of 7 separate decorations, but he never physically received the medals until this last weekend. And you can get more information on that at www.purpleheart.org. Navajo Nation President Joe Shirley has scheduled 6 meetings throughout the Navajo Nation to brief the public on a proposed redistricting plan for a Navajo Nation Council of 24 delegates. Last Friday, the Navajo Nation Supreme Court ordered that the Navajo Board of Election Supervisors certify the results of the December 15, 2009 initiative special election in which Navajo voters supported reducing the council to 24 delegates and authorized a presidential line-item veto for spending legislation. The court also ordered that President Shirley present a plan to NBOES by June 11th and that NBOS approve it by June 18th. Immediately following the December 15th special election, President Shirley had directed his staff to prepare redistricting plans for presentation to the public. Some 20 meetings were held across the nation where a dozen plans were presented. The plans incorporated various criteria, data, and recommendation from the public. A final plan to be recommended, named J2, was completed on May 13th of this year. Beginning June 3rd, Shirley scheduled 5 agency meetings and a 6th at a proposed new 6th Southwest agency in Dilkin to further familiarize the public with the plan. And today we talk with Shoshone-Bannock tribal member Mark Trahant, who is ending up his year-long observation of health care legislation in the United States and related subjects. Mark, one of our last columns was about tribal governments being a business and being required to provide health care. So here's Mark talking about that observation as a Kaiser Media Fellow. Mark Trahant, you've been on the healthcare observation trail for almost a year now as a Kaiser Fellow. Time went fast. We want to talk a little bit about that as a big picture roundup, but one of your last columns that intrigued me had to do with tribal governments are business and they're mandated to provide insurance, health insurance under this new healthcare improvement law. What can you tell us about that? Give me an idea then at the end about what you've learned during this last year.
Okay. Well, first on the employment side, I think it's easy to forget that tribes and all governments are significant employers. In some parts of the country, for example, northern Idaho, the Courte tribe is the largest employer in the region. So it's a very large employer base. And the healthcare law really focuses on employers. It says you have to provide this minimum level of insurance. Now, the law does allow for some exceptions for people who've been self-insuring, companies have been self-insuring, and many tribes do just that. But it's interesting because the regulations are such that if there's any changes at all, then they'll probably have to go to a plan that meets the minimum standards. So if you have a self-insurance scheme and you stick with it exactly, then you're probably off the hook. But once you make any changes, boom, the law kicks in.
Okay, my understanding is there was an exemption for individuals, individual American Indians covered by Indian Health Service.
Correct, and that remains in effect.
Remains in effect. And tribal government not only has businesses, it's being treated as a business as well under this law?
Well, no, all governments are required to do this. This would apply to any governmental unit.
So it applies not only to businesses owned by tribal members, businesses owned by tribal governments, but all governments are mandated as well.
Correct.
So, and that includes county governments, town governments, wherever there's employment opportunities.
Right. And if you think of what this means, you take Oreilles, for example, and if the employer workforce is covered with insurance, it means when they go to IHS, that first round of insurance will get the bill rather than the IHS, which in theory should free up money for other services.
Indeed. Good. So you've been on this fellowship for a year, traveling all over the world, literally at times, or at least we found you in many places of the world. What's the overall picture that you observed?
Well, the overall picture is that the Indian Health Service is better than it gets credit for. It has its problems, and the underfunding is as bad as it's reported. But that's not the only story, that there are pockets of excellence that are really remarkable, and they need to be explored as well. The other story that I think is important for Indian country to understand is that there's been a push for parity in funding, and the Obama administration's been great with bumping the budget the last two rounds since they've had control of the figures for IHS. But in future years, that's going to be really difficult. The fact is the federal government's going to be under tremendous strain, and funding anything at full capacity is going to be difficult going forward.
All programs across
All
the board
programs
are going to have difficulty.
And it's not because anyone's a bad manager or anything else. It's just because of demographics. We're growing older, and that's putting a burden on the system that should have been expected, but it hasn't been. And now we're starting to pay for it.
And is it possible that this Healthcare Improvement Act could just simply be a success in integrating healthcare responses that begin to reduce costs?
I think so. I think it's going to take time, and we're just going to be learning as we go. But I think, well, first of all, we cannot do what we're doing. It's just not sustainable. The system has to get cheaper. There's just no way around it. And the rest of the world has done that. So it's not totally beyond our capacity. It's just we've had the most expensive system in the world and don't get the most expensive results.
Is that coupled with a little bit of personal responsibility, like preventing diabetes might help out in the long run, personally and at the national level?
Well, sure. Diabetes is the most expensive disease in America, and because it's chronic and long-term. But, you know, one of the perceptions of diabetes is really interesting, that everyone thinks of diabetes first up as your inability to exercise and control your weight, and those certainly are factors. But the third largest factor of diabetes is age. And as you live longer, you become more, it becomes more of a factor in whether or not you get the disease.
In other words, the longer you live, the more prone to passing away you are.
Yeah, isn't that the hell of it?
Where can we find your columns?
MarkTrahant.com is an easy place, but they're in many publications across the country, and I'm grateful for that, including News from Indian Country.
We'll find you again on the trail, Mark, wherever you may be going. I really appreciate your time. Come join us again soon.
Thank you.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you for joining with us. Stop by again soon. Miigwech.